Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and this esteemed chamber. I have butterflies like the first speech I gave on this, especially following three of my colleagues in the bar that they set so high. I reflect on my time here, and it started way back in 2004 when I was asked by the Democratic leadership to run for state representative of District 17. And my daughters that I was a single parent raising were 12 and 13 years old. And I said I couldn't because I needed to be home. So at the time I was a Wayne County Commissioner. I stuck with that. That's not a lot of work. Good pay though. And a guy by the name of Andy Dillon filed at 420 for state rep of the 17th district, and the rest was history. He gave me some good advice and asked me to run for this seat because he said he had 109 other races to worry about. He didn't want to worry about his predecessor. But I'm reminded also, once I got elected, we went into training. And right now, the new legislators are in the Mackinac room doing the House training. And a couple of things were said in the training. One is, if you ever looked at this building or walked into this room and you weren't in total awe, then it's time to leave. I'm ready to leave, but I'm still in total awe of this room. Also, I was part of the largest class ever. I think there was 65 of us 4 years ago. And I got to know my colleagues. I got to know them as people and where they're from and their family members. And it wasn't until the leadership vote that we broke up into two different caucuses and went into the Democratic room or the Republican room. And in a lot of ways, the gloves were on from that point on. A lot of things have been partisan. They've been very partisan. And there's been some bad legislation that has eked out over my 4 years that I don't necessarily am proud of or will boast about. There's been a lot of flaws that have been pointed out by previous speakers: term limits, lack of deliberation, and partisanship. But I'd like to emphasize the work that's been done on a bipartisan basis, which is 95% of what we do here. In 2010, Michiganders were screaming for results. Since then, we've had 4 balanced budgets that have been put in place 4 months beforehand. I had school administrators that said, if you cut my budget, at least don't do it September 30th. Give me some notice. I was delighted to be part of a very, very important time in Michigan's history. I was here for the passage of new and many talked about acts such as medical marijuana, school reform, the grand bargain, reduction in bureaucracy of state government, minimum wage, right to work, Affordable Care Act, known by Mike Shirkey as Obamacare. I got the opportunity to be at the forefront and discuss and work on a lot of these influential things. My very first term, I was appointed to tax policy, and I remember coming here with the ambition that our whole tax structure needed revamping. And with a new legislature and a new governor, I thought we were going to roll up our sleeves and take everything from Proposal A to the way we funded schools, etc. We have made some gains in that bit by bit, but I look at next legislators to really look how we fund local governments. I was honored to be on Energy and Tech with Ken Horn, thinking we're going to set a new energy policy. But under the Andy Dillon administration, they had done that. So one of Ken Horn's first things at the first committee was, don't think that we're going to redo the whole energy policy. So we took up little things. But I was also placed on Judiciary, which was chaired by John Walsh in my first term. I have to give great kudos to John Walsh and the leadership he has shown, not just my first term and second, but through the grand bargain. And I remember a lot of issues that were taken up. The Republicans were driving the agenda, and medical marijuana was in the newspapers, and the media was screaming that we do something about medical marijuana to define the constraints of the act. And I said to John, if there's ever you want to get around to doing anything with medical marijuana, count me in. Well, in June, he appointed Ken Horn and I to be co-chairs of a task force on medical marijuana. And never did I think that my first term I would be the pot guy. But we took it very, very seriously. There were 8 bills that were introduced. We decided to push 4 of them after touring the state and having many public hearings. Ken Horn and I and the committee agreed on 4. The only problem is 2 of those were passed before Right to Work came and was voted on. And the other 2, which included my bill, which was, I think, the signature bill of the act, it came out of the House, but it was still over at the Senate. Well, Democrats realized that they needed 3/4, and they don't have the numbers over there. So they decided that these were 2 bills they could make their influence. And I see John shaking his head because he remembers that the very last day we were in session, I was running back and forth between the Senate and the House, begging for a vote over there. And it was finally voted out at 3 a.m., and many of you that were here, we were all putting our coats on when it came back over here at 4:17 a.m. And my bill was the last one voted out last session, but it was by the bipartisanship. Ken Horn was working it, John Walsh was working it. That was something to remember. I'd like to thank Randy Richardville and the Senate leadership for actually getting that out. I have to look back on my time here and really give respect to the deference and respect that I received from Republican leadership. And I'm not trying to kiss up, but I heard about the nightmares of previous session. You never knew when committees were going to be on time. You never knew when session was going to be called. Things run around here like scheduled trains. And I don't always agree, many times disagree with what's happening, but there's a certain deference and respect. This session, I was put on the Financial Liability Reform Committee. I'd like to thank Earl Pileski for the respect he showed me. Very honored to be with Gail Haynes on health policy and some of the issues she tackled. And to her credit, how she stood up for what was right, that I often followed her. But also judiciary with Speaker-elect Kevin Cotter. Thank you for the deference. Again, I didn't agree with everything that came out, but well respected. But I'd like to give a shout out to our speaker, Jace Bolger, because one of the most defining things I think of my life will be my appointment on the Governor's Committee on Mental Health and Wellness. And out of all the Democrats, he picked me and Matt Laurie on the Republican side. And I remember that first meeting of the Commission on Mental Health and Wellness. And Senator Rebecca Warren said very bluntly to Lieutenant Governor Brian Calley, there's only 6 of us on the committee, and she says, I have 2 questions for you before we even get started. And one is this some report that's already been written and this commission is here to rubber stamp it? And he said, absolutely not. And Rebecca says, okay. The second question, is this something that we're going to work on and toil over and come to a good work product, and it's going to be some report that's put on a shelf? And the Lieutenant Governor assured her that wasn't the case, and it truly wasn't. The report that came out from the Governor's Committee on Mental Health and Wellness in February, there were action items that need to be done in the budget, and there were appropriations made. There was language that needed to be changed by executive order, and there were bills that needed to be legislative and put through, which were. So I'm very proud of that. And Jim Haveman in his retirement, Senator Bruce Caswell, and the Lieutenant Governor, Brian Calley, showed me a great example of not partisan politics, but doing what is right. And every recommendation that came out of that committee had to be agreed upon by all 6 of us. And he did not try to drive the agenda or anything else. He spoke out. We all know the advocate for autism, but also for mental health. Also this session, I'd like to thank Kurt Heisey. He came to me and says, the Attorney General is forming this committee Human Trafficking Task Force. Would you like to be on it? And I'm like, here's another publicity stunt. And he said, no, we're going to get to work. And they really did. The Attorney General put together a stellar task force from stakeholders, victims, people that deal every day. It wasn't a bunch of legislators patting themselves on the back, and very proud of the work there. There's some bills that I proposed that weren't taken up. Flip the ballot, where we have to vote on local issues before governor or presidential. I've been pushing for husband has the option of taking a wife's name. Throwing these out in case maybe they're taken up next session. And my stern belief that if we made the Michigan Catastrophic Claims Fund transparent and the light of day, how they come about their statistics, et cetera, that it actually would lower auto insurance. Special thanks to the great policy staff and everybody that works in the HOB and in this building. I'd like to thank my legislative staff, especially the two that got me started and helped me learn the ropes, Jack Schmidt and Amy Beard. They both have gone on to better jobs and making a definite influence in this state. Katie Stearns, who is now a law school student at Wayne State, and Nick and Celeste, who are, sorry to say, are still with me because they have to bear this out. Ironically, 10 years after I made that decision that I needed to stay home, I'm going home. And whereas I did it because my girls needed me, now I need them. And they're 23 and 24 now, and they don't need daddy anymore. I'm very, very thankful for my service. I'm proud of what we have collectively accomplished and done for this state. Our residents were screaming to get something done and work as a cohesive body, and 95% of the time we did. The last 4 years of representing my district in the state of Michigan has been the greatest honor ever. And I just ask to continue the betterment of Michigan. I hope that we improve upon the philosophy and tackle the issues as both Democrat and Republican and put the titles aside and work in bipartisanship. When we can't work together, it's ourselves. It is not ourselves that suffer, but the people of Michigan who truly agonize. I wish all of the new and returning reps the utmost of luck, and thank you very much for this honor.